Have you ever been called a hero for something people completely misunderstood? They said the shy girl from the cleaning crew kissed the CEO in the middle of a boardroom emergency. But what really happened that night wasn't a kiss. It was CPR that brought a dying man back to life. The 40th floor of Hawthorne Medical Tech wasn't a place for people like Janelle Carter. That level belonged to executives in designer suits who made million-dollar decisions before lunch. Down on the first floor in a supply closet that smelled of disinfectant and forgotten dreams, 28-year-old Janelle pulled on her cleaning gloves and slipped a worn medical textbook into her jacket. She moved through those marble hallways like a shadow, invisible by choice, unnoticed by design. After watching her sister die because she'd frozen during an emergency, staying invisible felt safer than being seen. Earlier that evening, Janelle had found Marcus from accounting, slumped beside the vending machines, skin pale and trembling. Low blood sugar. Without hesitation, she'd grabbed glucose solution from the first aid station and steadied his shaking hands while he drank. Color flooded back to his face. He muttered a quick thanks without making eye contact, then hurried away, already scrolling through his phone. No acknowledgement. No recognition that this shy girl had just prevented his collapse. Janelle simply gathered her cleaning supplies and moved on. Helping people was her gift, the one nobody ever noticed. But upstairs in the glass-walled boardroom where billion-dollar contracts were signed, CEO Landon Hawthorne's chest suddenly seized. His vision tunneled to black. The presentation slides dissolved into nothing. And through the corridor, Janelle heard the sound that still haunted her nightmares, grown men shouting in panic. "Does anyone know CPR?" Her hands started trembling, but her feet were already moving toward the one moment that would change everything. What this shy girl did next would expose a corporate cover-up and reveal that sometimes the most heartwarming acts of courage come from the people everyone overlooks. Janelle stood frozen outside the boardroom, her mop handle gripping her palm. Through the glass walls, she could see executives circling someone collapsed on the floor. Landon Hawthorne, the brilliant CEO whose innovations had saved thousands of lives. Now he lay motionless on imported marble. "Someone call for help," a voice screamed. "Nobody knows CPR," another shouted back. The panic in their voices pulled Janelle forward. She dropped her cleaning cart and pushed through the door just as Claudia Reeves, head of public relations, stepped into her path. "You can't be here. This floor is restricted." Claudia's tone was sharp, dismissive. Her eyes barely registered Janelle as human, just an inconvenience in a maintenance uniform. Janelle's voice came out barely louder than a whisper. "That man isn't breathing. Security will handle." But Janelle was already moving past her, kneeling beside Landon with trembling hands that remembered every page of every medical textbook she'd read during sleepless nights. She could hear her sister Rachel's voice from years ago. "You were born to save people, Janelle." She positioned her hands on Landon's chest. 30 compressions. Perfect rhythm. The CPR technique she'd practiced 1,000 times on training dummies, terrified she'd need it again and wouldn't remember. Landon's chest rose and fell under her palms, but his eyes stayed closed. No pulse. No breath. The memory crashed over her. Rachel on the kitchen floor, lips turning blue, Janelle frozen in panic, unable to help. "Not again. Please, not again." In desperation, she tilted Landon's head back and gave 2 rescue breaths, mouth to mouth, fighting to pull him back from death. And then Landon's hand shot up, fingers wrapping around her wrist with startling strength. His eyes opened. He gasped, alive. Relief flooded through Janelle so powerfully, she nearly collapsed. The room erupted in chaos, people shouting for water, calling his name, but Landon's gaze locked onto her face, trying to understand who had just saved his life. Before he could speak, Claudia was orchestrating damage control. "Clear this floor immediately. I need everyone's phones, now." Janelle stumbled backward, heart hammering. She'd done it. She'd actually saved him. But through the glass, she noticed a young employee quickly pulling his phone away from the doorway, guilt written across his face. He'd been recording. Within 20 minutes, the rumor exploded through the company's messaging system. That shy girl from the night shift kissed the CEO. Janelle didn't know about the gossip yet. She was in the supply closet, hands still shaking, when Walter Grant found her. The 68-year-old security guard draped his jacket over her shoulders. "You just saved that man's life," Walter said quietly. "I couldn't let it happen again." Her voice fractured. "Not like Rachel. Truth has a way of surviving, kid, even when people try to bury it." Janelle didn't understand his warning, not yet. At the hospital, Landon woke to sterile white lights and Claudia sitting beside his bed with rehearsed concern. "What happened?" His throat felt raw. "You collapsed during your presentation. Medical team revived you. You're stable." Claudia's response was smooth, controlled. "Everything's being managed." But Landon remembered differently. He remembered trembling hands pressing against his chest with desperate precision. A face hovering above his eyes filled with the kind of fierce care he hadn't seen since his fiancée died in his arms 6 years ago, minutes before help could arrive. "Who performed CPR before the paramedics got there?" Claudia hesitated just long enough. "The emergency response was very quick." It was a lie. Landon felt it in his bones. Meanwhile, at Hawthorne's PR headquarters, Claudia stared at the security monitor. 3 clicks later, she'd shut down the visible camera feed, deleted the footage, sent an email to HR Investigate Night Shift employee for unauthorized floor access. What Claudia didn't realize was that Hawthorne's system had a fail-safe backup server that recorded everything continuously accessible only to the CEO and IT security. The video she'd erased still existed. When Janelle returned to work the next night, everything felt wrong. People stared, whispered. Some smiled in ways that made her stomach turn. In the break room, 2 administrative assistants were talking, unaware she was there. "Did you hear that cleaner actually kissed him? So desperate for attention. It's embarrassing. Some people will do anything to climb the ladder." Janelle backed out before they could see her face, their words cutting deeper than they'd ever know. This heartwarming act of courage saving a life had been twisted into something ugly. Walter found her in the stairwell, struggling to breathe. "Don't let their ignorance define what you did," he said firmly. "You gave that man a second chance. That's not something to be ashamed of." But shame wasn't what Janelle felt. It was something worse, the familiar weight of being invisible again, except this time people were looking and seeing all the wrong things. What none of them knew was that upstairs in a secure server room, the truth was waiting. And it was about to find its way into the light. Because some secrets are too important to stay buried, and some acts of courage demand to be recognized. 3 days after saving Landon's life, Janelle came home to find 7-year-old Lily waiting by the apartment door, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Auntie, your face looks sad today." Janelle knelt down, forcing brightness into her voice. "Just tired, sweetie." But Lily, who had her mother's eyes, Rachel's eyes, wrapped small arms around Janelle's neck. "It's okay to be sad with me. I won't tell anyone." After tucking Lily into bed, Janelle pulled the box from her closet, Rachel's nursing school notebook. pages worn soft from years of reading marked with highlighter and desperate hope. On the inside cover, her sister's handwriting, "Janelle, you were born to save people. Don't let fear steal that from you." Janelle traced the words with shaking fingers. She'd saved Landon. She'd performed CPR perfectly. And somehow that inspirational moment, the moment she'd finally done what she couldn't do for Rachel, had been transformed into a scandal. Across the city, Landon sat in his penthouse office reading the incident report for the fourth time. CPR administered by unidentified individual prior to paramedic arrival. Subject regained consciousness on site. Unidentified individual. Those words echoed in his mind, mixing with the memory of trembling hands and a whispered voice. That man isn't breathing. His instincts, the same ones that had built a medical empire, were screaming that something was deeply wrong. He called IT security. "The footage from the 40th floor boardroom the night I collapsed. I need it." "Sir, that feed was shut down. There's nothing available." Landon's jaw tightened. "Check the backup server. The one PR doesn't have access to." A pause. Then, "Sir, the auto archive caught everything. Sending it now." 3 minutes later, Landon watched the truth unfold on his screen. A shy girl in a maintenance uniform pushing through despite Claudia's attempts to block her, kneeling beside him with hands that shook but never hesitated. Performing CPR with textbook precision compressions that came from real medical training, not luck. Leaning down to give rescue breaths because he wasn't responding. And then his own hand reaching up, grabbing her wrist as life flooded back. No kiss. No manipulation. Just a terrified woman fighting death with everything she had. The video showed something else too, Claudia alone in the security office systematically deleting files. Landon stood, grabbed his coat, and headed for the door. It was time to find the woman who'd saved him and to understand why someone had tried to erase her from existence. The next morning, Janelle's phone lit up with an email that stopped her heart. Subject: mandatory HR review. You are suspended pending investigation of unauthorized access to restricted areas, effective immediately. Her hands went numb. The phone slipped from her grip. Walter found her in the parking lot an hour later, sitting in her car, staring at nothing. "They're saying I violated protocol." Her voice was hollow. "That I shouldn't have been up there." Walter's expression hardened. "That's bureaucratic nonsense. You saved Landon Hawthorne's life. Without you, he'd be dead. Maybe I should have stayed in my place. Maybe if I'd just stayed invisible." Walter leaned against her car. "Kid, being invisible didn't save that man. Being brave did. And now someone's trying to punish you for it, because the truth doesn't fit their story." Why would they do this? Because truth is messy. It's inconvenient. And some people would rather protect an image than protect what's right. He met her eyes. "But here's what I know about truth. It doesn't stay buried. Not when it matters." Janelle's phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello." Her voice trembled. Janelle Carter. The voice was controlled, unmistakably authoritative. "Yes. This is Landon Hawthorne. I've been trying to find you." Her breath caught. "I've seen the security footage, the real footage." His voice shifted, became warmer. "You saved my life. Not with a kiss, not for attention, with CPR that you clearly trained for. And I need you to know that what you did, I wouldn't be here without you." Tears spilled down Janelle's cheeks before she could stop them. "I also know you've been suspended for helping me." His tone turned cold, sharp with anger, but not at her. "That ends now. I'm calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow at 10. I need you there." I don't know if I can face them. You already faced death and won. His voice softened. Facing a boardroom will be easier, I promise. And Janelle, bring anyone who makes you feel strong. You deserve to have people in your corner. The call ended. Walter was watching with a knowing smile. Sounds like truth just found its way home. But Janelle wasn't thinking about vindication. She was thinking about walking into that boardroom again, the place where she'd knelt on cold marble and breathed life into a stranger. The place where this heartwarming act of courage had been twisted into gossip and shame. Tomorrow she'd have to face everyone who'd whispered about her. Tomorrow she'd have to stop being invisible. And tomorrow she'd discover that sometimes the most inspirational moments come not from being fearless, but from being afraid and showing up anyway. Because the truth was about to break free, and it would change everything. At 9:45 the next morning, Janelle stood outside Hawthorne Medical Tech, with Walter beside her and Lily gripping her hand. I can't do this, Janelle whispered. Lily looked up with Rachel's eyes. But you already did the scary part, Auntie. You saved him. Walter smiled. The kid's got a point. The boardroom was packed executives in tailored suits, department heads with portfolios, and Landon Hawthorne at the head of the table. Claudia Reeves sat 3 seats down, tension radiating from her clenched jaw. When Janelle entered, Landon stood. Ms. Carter, thank you for coming. Every head turned. Janelle wanted to run, but Lily squeezed her hand as Walter guided her to a chair. Landon didn't waste words. 5 nights ago, I died in this room. The person who brought me back has been repaid with suspension. That ends today. He pressed a button. The wall screen lit up. The footage played in crystal clarity, Janelle pushing through despite Claudia's objections, kneeling with trembling hands, performing CPR with practiced precision. Then the moment everyone misunderstood, leaning down to give rescue breaths. Not a kiss. Life-saving CPR. The room watched in silence as Landon's hand grabbed Janelle's wrist, his eyes opening, gasping back to consciousness. Then a second clip, Claudia alone methodically shutting down camera feeds, deleting files, typing an email recommending Janelle's removal. The timestamps were undeniable. Ms. Reeves. Landon's voice cut like ice. Would you care to explain why you erased evidence of someone saving my life, then recommended her termination? Claudia stood slowly. I was protecting this company. The rumor that a shy girl from maintenance had kissed the CEO would have been a PR disaster. If that leaked, optics. Landon's tone was dangerously quiet. You chose optics over a human life. I chose to protect 4,000 employees from scandal. Claudia's composure cracked. So the last time I failed to control a narrative, one leaked photo destroyed an entire division. 400 people lost their jobs, their homes. I couldn't let that happen again. For the first time, Janelle saw past the corporate armor to the fear beneath. Claudia wasn't just calculating, she was terrified of repeating a failure that haunted her. But Landon's expression remained firm. So you buried the woman who saved my life, to protect a headline. You're suspended effective immediately, Landon continued. There will be a full investigation. Claudia gathered her belongings in silence. Before leaving, she paused. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Then she was gone. Landon turned to Janelle. Would you stand, please? Janelle's legs barely held her, but she stood. 6 years ago, my fiancé had a stroke while I was in a meeting across town. Landon's voice became simply human. By the time I reached her, it was too late. Minutes too late. His hands gripped the table. I've carried that guilt every day. But Janelle, you did what I couldn't do. You didn't freeze. You were there. Janelle's vision blurred. My sister Rachel died because I didn't know CPR well enough. I froze. She was gasping and I just stood there. I thought I was useless until you grabbed my hand and came back. The room sat in reverent silence. Then Lily stood. My mommy died too, but Auntie Janelle saved you. That means she's a real hero, doesn't it? Walter started clapping. Slowly, others joined genuine recognition. Landon stepped closer. I'd like to offer you a position. Director of Medical Safety and Emergency Response. You'd develop training programs, oversee protocols, ensure this never depends on luck again. I'm just a cleaner. I dropped out of nursing school. You saved the CEO of a billion-dollar company using CPR from years of self-study, Landon said firmly. That's not just anything. Walter grinned. Yeah, I've been telling you for 2 years you were wasting your light. Janelle looked at Lily, beaming with absolute faith. What if people think you're only offering this because I saved you? Then they'll be right. Landon said simply. Because you earned this the moment you walked through that door when everyone else stood frozen. That's exactly the courage I need. Janelle's hands shook, but this time from hope, not fear. This shy girl who'd spent years invisible was finally being seen. And it was the most terrifying, heartwarming, inspirational moment of her life. Sometimes courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and choosing to act anyway. 2 weeks later, Janelle sat in an office that still felt surreal. 23rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, a nameplate reading Janelle Carter, Director of Medical Safety. She'd stared at it every morning, waiting for someone to say there'd been a mistake. Nobody did. Her first initiative was straightforward but transformative mandatory CPR and first aid certification for every single employee at Hawthorne Medical Tech. No exceptions. From janitorial staff to the executive suite. When she'd presented the proposal to Landon, he'd smiled that warm smile she was starting to recognize. I was hoping you'd say exactly that. The company newsletter featured a story not about a kiss that never happened, but about a shy girl who'd saved a life and then revolutionized workplace safety. Landon insisted Janelle approve every word. She tried to remove the part calling her inspirational. The editor left it in. At home, Lily proudly stuck the article on the refrigerator with a heart-shaped magnet. Every morning, Janelle saw her own face looking back at her, and gradually it stopped feeling like a stranger. 3 weeks into her new role, everything changed again. During a training session, a young intern suddenly collapsed. Cardiac event. No warning signs. Janelle's vision tunneled. Her hands went ice cold. For one horrible second, she was back in that kitchen watching Rachel gasp for air, paralyzed by fear and inadequacy. But this time was different. Walter was there. 2 staff members she'd personally trained were there, and Landon, who'd been observing the session, was already kneeling beside the intern, hands positioned correctly, looking up at Janelle with calm, steady eyes. I've got compressions, he said evenly. You've got breaths. Together. That single word together shattered the freeze. Janelle dropped to her knees. They worked in perfect synchronization. 30 compressions. 2 rescue breaths. The rhythm they'd both learned from the same painful teacher loss. The intern gasped. Eyes fluttered open. Paramedics arrived minutes later and took over, but the critical window had already been won. In the hallway afterward, Janelle's hands shook so violently she had to sit down. Landon sat beside her, didn't speak, just handed her water and waited. I thought I'd freeze again, Janelle finally whispered. I thought it would be exactly like before. But it wasn't. Because you were there. No. He turned to face her fully. Because you've already proven you're stronger than your worst moment. Today was just a reminder that strength doesn't mean never being afraid. It means acting despite the fear. Janelle took a shaky breath. My sister's name was Rachel, 25 years old. Severe shellfish allergy, but someone didn't label the food at a party. By the time I found her, she was unconscious. I tried CPR, but I didn't know the proper technique. I did everything wrong, and I watched her die. It was the first time she'd spoken the complete truth aloud to anyone except Walter. Landon's voice was quiet, reverent. Her name was Emily, 28, stroke. I was 20 minutes away in a meeting, arrived just in time to hold her while she slipped away, knowing I was too late. They sat in silence, two people carrying identical shapes of grief, finally understanding they didn't have to carry them alone. I don't know if saving other lives makes up for the ones we lost, Janelle said softly. It doesn't. Landon's honesty was gentle but unflinching. But maybe it means their absence taught us to fight harder for the people who are still here. Maybe that's its own kind of meaning. Janelle studied her hands, the same hands that had trembled in that boardroom, the hands that had just helped save another life. Rachel would have liked that idea. Emily would have too. Walter appeared at the hallway's end, caught their eyes, nodded knowingly, and walked away. He had perfect timing for knowing when people needed space. Landon stood, offered his hand. Come on, let's check on our intern. Janelle took his hand and rose. For the first time in 7 years, when she thought about the word save, she didn't only think about failure. She thought about the CEO who'd grabbed her wrist and chosen to live. The intern who'd opened his eyes because she hadn't frozen. The possibility that maybe she was exactly where she belonged. That evening, she opened Rachel's notebook one final time. Beneath her sister's handwriting on the inside cover, Janelle added her own line, "You were right. I just needed time to believe it." And for the first time since Rachel's death, Janelle allowed herself to imagine a future defined not by the life she couldn't save, but by all the lives she still could. This heartwarming journey from invisible to indispensable wasn't just about CPR or corporate vindication. It was about learning that sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest gifts if we're brave enough to use them. Because healing doesn't erase the past. It just makes room for what comes next. 6 months after the night that changed everything, Janelle stood before a conference room filled with employees from every department. Accountants beside engineers, receptionists next to research scientists, all of them watching her demonstrate proper CPR technique. Hands centered on the chest, she explained, her voice steady and confident now. Compression depth of at least 2 inches, rate between 100 and 120 per minute, and most importantly, don't stop until help arrives or the person responds. A hand rose. Young woman from marketing, early 20s. What if you're terrified you'll mess it up? Janelle paused, meeting the woman's eyes with understanding. Then you do it terrified. Because imperfect action is infinitely better than perfect inaction. Someone's life is worth your fear. The room nodded, scribbled notes, practiced with renewed determination. As the session ended and Janelle packed her materials, a familiar voice came from the doorway. Lily tells me you were inspirational again today. She turned. Landon stood there in weekend clothes, no suit, no corporate armor, just jeans and a smile that made him look younger than 34. Lily exaggerates everything, Janelle said, but she was smiling too. Does she? Landon entered the room. Because from where I stand, you just taught 40 people how to save a life. Seems pretty inspirational to me. You're biased. Completely. He didn't even pretend otherwise. Over 6 months, something had shifted between them. Coffee breaks that lasted longer than necessary. Conversations that wandered into personal territory. The way Landon's expression softened when Janelle walked into a room. The way she found herself looking for him in crowded hallways. Lily had noticed immediately. Last week at dinner, she'd announced, "Mr. Landon looks at you like princes look at princesses in my books." Janelle had nearly choked on her pasta. Now, standing in the empty conference room, Landon's expression turned more serious. "How are you, really?" Janelle considered the question honestly. "Better, not perfect, but genuinely better?" "Good." He hesitated, then continued. "Emily used to say that guilt is just love with nowhere to go. That it proves we cared so deeply we don't know how to stop caring even after someone's gone." Janelle's throat tightened. Rachel said something similar. That grief is the price we pay for loving completely. They were both right. Landon's voice was gentle. But I think they'd also want us to find somewhere for that love to go. Somewhere that isn't just backward into pain. Janelle looked at him. Really looked. At the man who'd built an empire but still carried the weight of arriving too late. At the person who understood her not because he had answers, but because he'd asked the same impossible questions. "Landon." She started, uncertain how to finish. He stepped closer. Not invasive, just present. "I need you to know something. I don't care about you because you saved my life with CPR that night." "Then why?" "Because you're the kind of person who walks through doors everyone else is afraid to open. Because you teach people courage while still learning it yourself. Because when Lily draws pictures of heroes, she draws you, and she's absolutely right." Janelle felt tears threaten. "I'm not that person." "You are. You just spent 7 years believing you weren't." His voice softened further. "And I spent 6 years thinking I didn't deserve a second chance at anything. But standing here with you, maybe we were both wrong." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'd like to take you to dinner. Not as your employer. Not as the man whose life you saved. Just as someone who'd really like to know you better." He paused. "If that's something you'd want too." For 7 years, Janelle had made herself small, invisible, safe from being seen, and therefore safe from being hurt. But standing here in a room where she'd just taught others how to save lives, looking at a man who saw her as anything but invisible, she realized safety and living weren't the same thing. She reached out and took his hand. Small gesture, but deliberate. Certain. "I'd like that very much," she said. Landon's smile was sunrise soft and heartwarming. Yeah. And in that moment, 2 hearts that had believed they were too broken to love again discovered that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply try. 3 months later, Janelle stood in Hawthorne Medical Tech's lobby, watching new employees arrive for mandatory safety training. Among them, a young woman clutched her coffee with trembling hands, looking lost. Janelle approached. "First day?" The woman nodded. "I'm terrified I'll mess everything up." "Then you'll fit right in," Janelle said warmly. "The best people I know started out terrified." As the woman's shoulders relaxed, Landon appeared with Lily bouncing between them. "Dinner tonight?" he asked softly, fingers finding Janelle's. "Absolutely," she answered. Lily tugged both their sleeves. "Can we go to the place with the good breadsticks?" They laughed together, a real family built from broken pieces that had learned to fit. As they walked toward the elevator, Janelle no longer invisible. Landon no longer alone. Lily no longer wondering if her aunt would smile again, the camera pulled back to reveal a new plaque in the main atrium. In honor of those who choose courage when fear would be easier. May we all remember that a single act of CPR, a moment of bravery from a shy girl in a maintenance uniform, can change everything. May we learn to breathe life into the moments that matter most.